Art is not something we learn to do, but instead is a search to uncover and express that which already exists within all of us. We are the arts. Artist Dan McCall. This is The Artful Painter, art lessons for artists, collectors, and people who love art. Jonathan McPhillip's paintings shimmer with atmosphere and sparkle with light. Each painting he creates, he views as a welcome problem to solve, a delightful puzzle to piece together, and a celebration of his surroundings. Working equally in the studio and on location, his works includes the harbors, beaches, vessels, and architecture of the coastal marine environment of New England, including his home in Rhode Island. Chasing the ever-changing light and air drives Jonathan to paint. The perception of atmosphere viewers sense in his paintings is the result of his impressionistic style, tempered by a touch of realism and draftsmanship. Whether he paints indoors or outdoors, his method of painting is similar. In this edition of The Artful Painter, Jonathan shares his multifaceted approach to painting. He relates how his early art education that focused on modern art influenced his work in a positive way. Jonathan also encourages artists to take advantage of technology to promote their work. He candidly talks about working with galleries and how he views his relationship with his galleries as a partnership. Jonathan teaches a number of workshops, and so he takes the time to talk to us about his approach to teaching and how we as artists can best benefit from that experience. When faced with a myriad of choices in painting, Jonathan reveals he is drawn to scenes that show man's intervention in the landscape. Indeed, as you peer into the paintings of Jonathan McPhillip, you see a story only partially shown, perhaps suggesting a mystery and capturing the presence of man. My name is Carl Olson, and this is The Artful Painter. So Jonathan, I am really happy to be able to have you on The Artful Painter. I know a lot of things have changed in the last few weeks. One of the things is I know you were one of the artists that were invited to participate in the Olmsted Plein Air Invitational 2020, and you've also been an Olmsted alumni. So I forgot what years, 2016, 2017?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me, Carl. This is great to do. I'm very honored to be asked to do this, so I appreciate it. I was in the initial year of the Olmsted, and I think the first 3 years.
The first 3 years, yeah, okay.
Yeah. The only year that I missed was last year, and I had some probably just more like keeping an eye on some things in my personal life at home. It was not a good time to get to travel much for me. So, then this year I was really looking forward to doing it again, and honored that they asked me again, which is always great. So I'm still participating in the reimagined event they're working on, which is great. So hopefully have a chance to go back in the future.
It was shaping up to be a wonderful event. I know I went to at least one demo they do a really good job of having demonstrations and workshops and events. It's not just the week of painting, but there's so much that leads up to it and even things that happen afterwards. So it was shaping up to be really great in that aspect. But then we have, the pandemic, right? And I know Lillian Ansley, she's one of the co-founders. She has been working hard to reimagine how to connect artists with the public. Because that was one of the big features that you could go to the Olmsted Park and see all this come together and connect. And then you had the buying events and things like that. So she's really working hard I think that's one of the interesting things is when we have hardships like this, it sometimes becomes a fertile ground for rethinking how we connect with the public and how we market what we do as artists.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's definitely a disruption and a change that everyone's sort of going through. And as artists, I think we have to look back, like, what do we know? What can we do to help ourselves at this point, knowing what we know technologically? Now, we're all at little the different levels of how much we've embraced technology as far as websites and emails and social media and things like that. So I think that, as well as galleries, I think everybody is assessing what did they know before all this? What do they need to catch up on to try to stay at pace with this new remote, sort of remote world that we're living in? And what will it look like when, expectedly we get past this? How will things change? Because I suspect that things will not snap back to the exact way that they once were. So maybe that's where some of the hopeful possibilities are in front of us, that maybe there's some better ways of doing things that we were slow to pay attention to. I think that there'll be a blend of what we once did along with what we weren't doing enough of. So I think that, and that's okay with me. I'm okay with technology. I embrace it to a certain degree, and social media has become sort of a necessity. So you got to, know how to edit your images and things like that. And the transition from the day of slides to compact discs or DVDs and then into just straight up just digital photographs floating around in the cloud. I've been there through all of that and really liked it in the beginning. And so the technology end of it is definitely playing a big role right now. And I think everybody's sort of getting their bearings straight on how to do it and how to use it. I'm trying to figure out video platforms. That's what we're going to do. As I was supposed to do a demonstration in Hilton Head, the Art League of Hilton Head, ahead of the Olmsted, because I was going to go there, then go to the coast of Georgia to St. Simons and do some for the Olmsted there. So the Hilton Head thing, of course, got postponed, canceled that a little while ago. But there's also a reach out there to try to see, they'd like to know how can they do a virtual demonstration. So it's a collaborative effort of how we're going to do it, whose platform. I have to make sure I've got the right tools to do it without, you try not to go off and buy tremendous amounts of equipment or capital expenses at this point in time. Yeah. So, you try to work with what you got, but also make it play nice with the world of technology. So I think everybody's going through that to a different degree. And some people are just painting a lot. So that's another, I'm trying to do that as well, to take the opportunity to just keep painting, keep getting better.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen some say that, they had all these obligations and then the obligations evaporated. And so now, once they came to grips with that, they've decided, well, I'm just going to paint what I want to. No pressure. What a unique opportunity that is.
Yeah, that it's there. That's definitely the, if there's a silver lining, there's a little bit more time to do that. But some of that time gets eaten up too with trying to figure out, okay, how do I do a video presentation? How do I reach people in a different way? Keep connected with the galleries and what their temperature is on things and where they want to go with what they're doing. And the galleries that represent me, commercial galleries, they're all great. They do a great job on staying in touch with their collector base. So that's good. And living in New England, there's a bit of seasonality to what I do.
You're in Rhode Island, right?
Yeah, I'm in Saunderstown, Rhode Island, which is a little bit near we're very close to the coast. Newport, Rhode Island is probably a little bit more recognizable to people as a maybe a painting destination or a historical destination. So very close to there. Cape Cod, Maine, Connecticut a little bit too. So that's kind of where I do a lot of work. And it is a lot in the nice weather months in the summertime. And that's ahead of us, so we don't really know what that's going to look like yet. So,
right.
but the creep of cancellations kind of keeps marching forward, because even if we get let's say there is an attempt to return to normalcy, we still don't know what group gatherings are going to look like, even when we can leave our homes more. So
yeah, things are going to be different, and even now, I want to go back to what you were saying about learning how to do the videos and taking advantage of social media, improving our websites. All of those things involve significant learning curves oftentimes. And we often put those learning curves off because they are painful to go through. But this is a great time to dial it in. And it doesn't have to be real complicated. It doesn't have, doing the videos that doesn't have to be complicated. You can use the smartphone that you have, a couple of good lights, and just dial in the audio. It takes experimentation to do that, but it's well worth the effort to take the time to do it now while you've got that opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'd say 5 to 7 years ago, I was kind of into doing YouTube videos, and they were kind of crazy. They're still out there, and again, I look at them and I like my painting better now, of course. But they I would do the high speed video because you're trying to take a 2-hour plein air painting, and so you don't lose people's interest, which sometimes that can happen if you don't have high production of audio over it, and instruction and speaking, and almost sort of a scripted direction on what to do. If you're just a guy out there with a phone camera or a camera shooting yourself, I would just speed up the videos to make them, like an old Benny Hill show or something where everything's moving fast. And then they're cute, they're fun, they're nice, and they move through nicely. But I would say that I loved doing that back then, and then I sort of faded away from it for whatever reasons. I don't. Maybe they weren't. I didn't find them to be a tremendous marketing advantage that I thought they may have been, or just they were a lark at the time. So I have a little bit of that background, but I have a gap where I've stopped doing some of that stuff. So now I'm going back to the learning stages of it again. So it was nice to have a little bit of experience with it. And back then it was different too, like upload abilities and file storage, all that kind of stuff was different and more challenging than it is now, I think. Yeah. So I think now there's a little bit, I'm like, well, that video went up and worked. And I used to run into all kinds of problems with that stuff. So it was very much a small part of what I tried to do, but it was nice to have a little bit of experience in it. Because now if I try to do it going forward, I've got a little bit of background in it, but really not expertise.
You might enjoy, I don't know, are you familiar with Michael Chamberlain? I just released an episode with him, and he's really knocking it out of the ballpark with his YouTube videos. There's a lot to learn from him.
Yeah, I began that podcast when I saw it come up. That I had to break free from it. But yeah, that's great. With so many artists out there that have so many different backgrounds of knowledge, where they've come from, be it their prior careers or what they do now. So yeah, there's a lot of knowledge, a lot of stuff I'll probably never hear too much about. But it's great when you have podcasts like this that can kind of shed some light on that, on those tricks and things that other artists can do. So that's really great.
My YouTube game is very poor myself, but the podcast is my priority.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, I teach workshops occasionally, and demonstrations are becoming more popular. And actually, the part of my workshops that I think people find most engaging would be the demonstrations, because I don't mind blabbering on while I paint. I think that's kind of engaging, and it keeps me sort of in almost a detached mode from the painting. So the painting's trying to flow along on its own with one half of my brain, and the other half I'm trying to keep a conversation going. And I don't mind that. I actually kind of like that a little bit. So just speaking about art is sometimes more informative than the actual watching the process of it, because that moves fast and a lot can be missed. Like, oh, how did they do that brushstroke? And wait a minute, what 4 colors did they just put together there? That happens in a second and it's gone. Whereas the talking about the process is when people can sort of take notes or really absorb it a little bit more. So I think that's just as important, and I think just as beneficial to people. It is to me anyway, listening to things about art as much as watching it.
It's inspiring. I like watching artists work and talk. I would much rather do that than a traditional workshop almost, because I feel a tremendous amount of pressure when I go into a workshop. Because I'm exposed, I'm vulnerable, and I haven't embraced vulnerability yet. But I would almost rather watch and listen to a person talk about their process. And I've really come to enjoy watching these demonstrations. I'd like to see one of yours, maybe one day, once we're released from house arrest. Shelter in place orders. We can do that. I can do that.
Yeah, well, maybe there'll be some video up pretty soon.
Yeah. So Scott Kristensen and Christine Lashley, and people recognize Christine Lashley because she's also been associated with the Olmsted Plein Air event here in Atlanta, but they're doing Zoom conferences where they talk about different art topics. And I don't know how many participants they had last week, but it was really well attended, and it was quite interesting to see how it worked. It was the first time they ever did it, and so there's a learning curve with that. But that's a great opportunity for artists to have little group sessions like that. Used to would go out and do plein air painting as a group. Now you can talk about art as a group. So that might be something that artists can look into doing at this time. And then that would be a tradition that could continue even after this thing passes. It's still a unique way to get together and talk about art.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I put out an email newsletter to my modest list of folks on my website who signed up for that type of thing. A couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, I said that I was looking into doing this, type of thing, like a Zoom platform or whatnot, to do streaming, and just looking for some feedback for interest. And, thankfully there was a decent number of people who responded like, yeah, let me know. So I'm currently in that phase of collecting. Okay, I've got a certain amount of people who are interested in this. Maybe there'd be more if I spread the word a little bit more. That's where I'm at, trying to, maybe like many other artists right now, trying to get my feet wet again with.
Well, that's it. I don't think we should feel guilty about what we're doing or not doing, but just try, just test the waters and see what happens. How important do you think having an email list is?
I think it's very important. I wish I took advantage of mine a little bit more, or expanded it more. And there's so much great advice going on out there right now, especially these days, about how to expand your contact list. Well, a lot of my, I want to say, selling of art is through some commercial galleries where they're carrying a lot of the water for that, for the contact list for my new work. And that's kind of where I place that work in those hands, and they do a fantastic job of that, of letting their collector base know. And then I have people who follow me. A lot of people who follow me might be workshop attendees of the past.
Yeah, it's a different audience, a slightly different audience.
It's a little bit of a different audience, more of an instructional audience for me, probably. But there's a blend. There's friends, the people, maybe some family. So it's one of those things that this is a good time to try to expand it and work on those types of things as well. So there's a lot of administrative stuff that can go on during a pandemic, I suppose. But yeah, I think those contacts are great, and it's great to have your own base of people, particularly for instructional reasons and demonstration purposes, so they can know where you're going to be and when you might be popping up. If that's the type of thing you do as an artist, if you like to do instruction, which I do, and I've been doing it long enough now that I've got some kind of return participants and followers, even sort of champions of my work that I really appreciate. That
nice.
They've done their own thing now, and they're out there selling, and they really put their shoulders to the wheel and did it, and also took workshops from other people and learned other things, and hopefully didn't paint like me, and
yeah.
like took their own style in the direction they needed to, and it's work. And so I see it through social media and whatnot. That, oh wow, that's great. It makes me feel good that happened for them. And some people do it just as they don't want to take it as seriously as that. It's something to do for fun, more so than accolades or selling. So whatever your path is, that's fine. But it's great to see people who have taken it and weren't sure they could do it. Or what I mean by doing it is to paint, get better at painting, and then in turn have shows or try to sell it. And they do it. That's great to see. So that's rewarding. I enjoy it as much as doing my own solitary studio work or plein air work. That, I guess that's what the plein air events are great for too, is a camaraderie of meeting up with other friends, and that's a good thing we're missing right now, I suppose. And I don't do a ton of plein air events.
How many do you do typically?
I probably do 2 a year. I try to do 2 a year if I can. Some years I've only done one. At this point, some of the larger ones that I have not even really entertained getting into or trying for, happened at my peak time in the summer here in southern New England. In July, August, June, when I've got a lot of stuff to do in my own little neck of the woods. Now that might change someday, where I have a little bit more free time to move about and travel a little bit more to the various events. So I kind of like the Olmsted in Atlanta is phenomenal, and they've just been so the hospitality is fantastic, and they really treat the artists great. So I love going to that. As long as I'd be invited, I'll make every effort I can to go to that event. And last year, which was great fun, had a real good time with met some old friends, some new friends. So that's all good. Hope those things come back soon. I know they're all sort of in a holding pattern right now, and I hope I can do more of them in the future, whatever they may look like, or whatever process they may be, or changes they may undergo. We'll see. So that's just that to me. Yeah. Those events portion of what I do. Some artists like to see them as maybe a more primary thing that they do, and that's fine too. Everybody has sort of a different path to take, and that's good. I wouldn't say there's a wrong one or a right one.
Well, Jonathan, I got to ask you, you've been to Atlanta a few times. You mentioned the hospitality down here, which I'm glad to hear. Did you have any particular experience that really stood out in your mind that you enjoyed?
When I was at the event 2 years ago, I believe it was the first year they had opened it up to the whole state. And because for the first 2 or 3 years, it was only in the metro Atlanta area.
Right, yeah.
And maybe Decatur, I think. So when they opened that up, I think that was really great. That was a really good time. My host family, who are now great friends of mine, and we stay in contact. They had another home that was just over the border, I think near Scaly Mountain Scaly Mountain Highlands in that area in North Carolina, I believe.
That's North Carolina. Yeah. It's just above Georgia. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But they were just a mile away from the Georgia border. So I went up there with them for a couple of days. Beautiful country. I didn't know how beautiful the mountain region was, and the lakes up Lake Raven,
that's where my wife is from. Yeah.
Oh gosh. Yeah. So I loved it painting up there. It rained cats and dogs.
It does.
Yeah, and I had a horrible sinus infection or something that I had brewing before the event, and I was just sort of in a weird medical state of trying to paint through that with rain, and
it was a slog then.
At the moment, I may not have said it was one of the greatest experiences with the circumstances, but in retrospect, God, it was fun. It was a good spot to be. It was. I saw some of the waterfalls that are up there. Wonderful. So when they expanded that was great. Another great thing that had happened to me in Atlanta was, I don't know if it was that same year, but they were working on the cyclorama. Is that at the?
Yes, it's at the History Center now.
Yeah, because they would have us. They organized us to paint at the History Center, usually outdoors. One time we were in during I think it was
the Swan House is there. Yeah.
Yeah, the Swan House was there. So there were terrible storms one time. So we were painting indoors, actually, inside the museum. But they let us take a sneak peek at the restoration as a group. And a couple of us painted inside. They gave us a small window to go inside and paint that being restored, or paint the interior before the public could ever see it. It was probably a year away from opening, I think, or maybe 8 months away from opening. And I did a painting of that. I still have the painting. I think I showed it at that event. There was some people in it. I don't always paint people. They're usually kind of secondary elements in my paintings if I do. And I just love that painting. It's a little different for me. It was.
Well, how many people have done a painting of the cyclorama?
No, I know.
I mean, that's unique.
Yeah, I'm actually freshening it up to. I think I'm going to give it as part of the reimagined event for the Olmsted. I think I'm going to put that back out there because I like it. And then, it was a little moment in time of history and something I won't, I don't know. I hope to get to see it again. But I have the painting of it. So, yeah. Did you say, have you seen it since it's been restored?
No, I haven't. I need to go see it. My wife and I would like to go see it, but of course we haven't been able to go anywhere of late. So.
I know. I my version of it, and it will likely be part of my, the offerings that we have for the Homestead Reimagined. I'll do something new too. I have something new.
Jonathan, I want to talk about your art a little bit, because when I look at your art, what I see, the first thing that came to my mind was, wow, they sparkle. They sparkle with light, and they have a tremendous atmospheric depth. And then I thought about, well, how do these paintings make me feel? And I feel joy, I feel delight, I feel happiness when I see these, and I think, boy, would I like to get out of my house and go to those locations. But anyway, that's the impression I have of your art. And water and light seem to dominate a lot of your paintings. How did that come about?
Well, I'm primarily a coastal marine painter, although I'll do just about anything if it strikes me. I like cityscapes. I've done a little bit of the mountains out west, but only when I've gone there. I need a lot more experience in that. So I have a variety of subject matter, but they usually lands back, and my primary focus is coastal, because I live near the coast in New England, so that's what I've grown up with and have had around me. How I've gotten to the point of what my paintings look like right now, probably a little bit of an evolution of how I take my toolbox of experiences and put them into paintings. And I'll speak now a little bit about plein air versus studio. I'm probably like a 50-50 artist, especially around here. I don't get out as much in the winter and brave the elements as I once did when I was younger, when I'd say, oh, I'll put on a snowsuit and go. I occasionally, if it warms up after the snow, I'll paint here in the winter outside. Yeah. But, usually around April and May, I start to get outside more to paint the locations around here, or be it going in other parts of New England, be it Cape Cod or Maine. When I try to formulate a painting that's, say, a studio painting, which is, a lot of what I do, it doesn't have that off-the-cuff immediacy that a plein air painting would, which is where a lot of people will explain. That's where you really learn what colors can look like in nature. And the more you do that, the more I believe that you can take those remembrances and bring them back to your paintings in the studio, which may be working from other plein air paintings, or photographs of plein air paintings, or photographs that you've taken as reference study yourself, and you can get past the photography to infuse these things you've learned in the field into the painting, be it light or sparkle of light that you're not really seeing in the photograph that you might be working from, or the prior reference you might be working from. You could take the composition of a prior scene and try to insert some of that energy and life that comes about from the atmosphere and in the punch of light that may not have otherwise been there. So I really like playing around with that kind of stuff. Sometimes it's presented to me in nature or in a photograph that I've taken, but usually I think they have to be. You got to bring that moment in sometimes. If you've caught them outside plein air, that's awesome, because you've had that experience. You've painted it more than several times. You've been able to do that. One thing I'd say is, over the years, there's the old mantra that if you do 1,000 paintings, that's when you can really start to learn and grow after that. So yes. I think I've done that. I'm pretty sure I've surpassed that number. And I totally agree with that. So that's a lot of practice. That's getting your mechanics down, and along the way, picking out some supplies and materials that you're comfortable with. Because if you're always changing that stuff, you never land on your feet. You're always kind of scrambling around. That's not to say you don't experiment and try different things, but it's always good to have a good a good base. Like my plein air setup is set up in 50 seconds, and I'm ready to go.
I think that's pretty important to do. Yeah, because your tools can really weigh you down if you're not organized with it.
Yeah, you see that in workshops sometimes when the scramble of everything, and it's just a matter of getting comfortable with that stuff, so you can paint more than you're dealing with your equipment and whatnot. Back to what I was saying is that with doing all those mechanics and having your stuff together when you're ready to paint is really important, and your studio setup too is conducive to you. Like I pop out in the studio and I'll paint for 15 minutes. And that might be my painting for the day. Whereas the rest of the day is spent doing emails or website and that kind of thing. And that's okay, because the next day, maybe there'll be 3 hours in the studio, or maybe more. I am not one who can grind for 8 hours straight in the studio. That's just not me. I think I used to be able to do that more. And that was really the practice part of painting for me. Now, these days, I'm finding a little bit more beneficial for me is to think about it more than doing it. And what I mean by that is some of my favorite paintings as in the past couple of years have been paintings that I was brewing on, stewing over for months.
Is that stewing over, is that completely mental, or are you also sketching and writing or doing something to augment that thinking process?
The mental part is always
yes.
You think, okay, what am I? And then there's the times when you can go put that to paper. Be it some sketching. I do love just doing some pencil sketching and thumbnails. So that's part of it too. I really do like taking. If I have the photographs, which I think many artists agree they're great for getting some compositional ideas in place, but then you really want to abandon those because the colors will not translate well to paintings, as has been discussed. I like to use photographs to get my compositional head straight, to figure out, okay, what am I going to use? What am I not going to use? So I put two things together two photographs together in a certain way. So, what I like to do is sometimes take the photographs and I'll augment them in a digital sketching program or an application.
Like what?
ArtSet Pro is a great one for Apple.
ArtSet Pro.
ArtSet Pro, because you can import your photo and then just paint over it with, they have tool brush, you can have different types of brushes and stuff. And it's just, to me, it's another form of sketching to eliminate ideas or add possibilities, just a little sliver of the process to get you closer. So then you can also do your traditional sketching and whatnot. And this is all, to me, in the goal of getting a studio painting done the way I envision it or hope. And they never come out the way they're always a little different or quite a bit different than I actually envision them in my head. I don't have that ability to say, okay, I have a photographic idea of what I want it to look like, and it's going to look just like that.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because this is my experience. What's in my head doesn't necessarily end up being on the surface.
Yeah. So, sometimes it dictates itself as it goes along.
Yeah. Yeah.
It pushes, you're subconsciously pushing yourself into a different direction. I think that's okay. Some people don't. Some people like to say, well, no, you didn't look like what, you should look like what you thought. I get that. That's fine. But that's just not how I operate. But my point of all this is that given my life has a lot of things going on with family and with my family and my kids, and that's what life is. So art is part of my life. If I can do things to think about the image that I want to convey and the feeling I want to convey in a painting, the more time I spend on that, when I hit the canvas, when I've done it well, the preparation ahead of time, there's no dawdling for me. In those paintings, which again, I do a lot of paintings in the course of a year, that they're the ones that they're the outliers that hit all the bells. Those are the ones, and I know they're coming because when I hit the canvas, the paint flies off the brush like they paint themselves because they've already been done. In a sense, because I've thought them through. It doesn't mean that I don't like going in and doing an off-the-cuff painting because I just saw an image in my bank of photos of plein air painting in the corner of the studio that I want to replicate larger. I'll do that still. I still like that. I just know that the preparation can be really important to hitting a higher level. And when people see me paint, they say I paint very fast. I do. I paint expeditiously, but that or expediently, I guess.
So you have a splatter zone.
Yeah, I do. I guess that's because the elements of my life, and I don't have the ability to sit in front of the easel for 8 hours a day. Maybe, perhaps someday I will, and then there'll be a whole new level of technical things. But right now, my technical abilities of my brush moving around the palette and hitting the canvas, that's really rote for me in a lot of ways. And, I know the colors I want to grab, and that's a lot of practice that people starting out it's kind of required. You got to get it to where the color that you want to mix or the value you want to catch, you kind of got to know how to do it.
So you're saying it's got to become muscle memory at some point.
Learned instinct. Becomes an instinct where you kind of know how to do it, and that's the biggest struggling part. Is that so many times in workshops you go, well, how did you make that color? And that's a tough one, because for me there's not formulas for this. I've experimented 4 times on my palette in the matter of 8 seconds. And then I've got it. And if I didn't, then I'll do it again. And it's hard to describe that in words. And I know some artists are very good at 50% of this color, 20% of this color, and will get you the sky you want. I get that, but I think artists need to do a little bit of that experimentation. Sort of personal, has to happen on your own. And a workshop instructor can help you get to that understanding of doing that, but that's where the work is. And I've done a lot of that over the years. I mean, I studied art in college, so that was a long time ago, and it gave me a set of tools, and it was definitely more of a modern, contemporary bent, and that's what I did when I came out. And then later on, I discovered the joy of plein air painting and being outdoors, which I was not exposed to back in college. But I still love all the things I learned back then, and a lot of them were just the practice of the doing. And now I think my point now is a little bit of thoughtfulness goes a long way, perhaps a little bit more than canvas time and easel time. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by your education experience, because you mentioned it was mostly modern, and I assume that probably includes abstract and that sort of art. Sometimes there seems to be this divide between people who practice representational art and the abstract and modern art. And I appreciated what you said there. It was positive. You had lessons from both. What do you think about that apparent schism?
No, it's there for sure. And here's where I come down at. So I didn't have a lot of high school, secondary education. I was always a good artist. I could doodle things. But I never took it to a different level before the age of 18. So I went to a small liberal arts college in Connecticut called Connecticut College. Didn't know what I was going to be doing. I had no idea, but I did know I was going to be taking some art classes because I was okay at it. I did that at the entry level, and I had, actually, it was my advisor was in the faculty of the art department, a fellow by the name of Barclay Hendricks, who passed away several years ago now, African-American artist. He's really being recognized now in his work in life at this point, but he was just phenomenal. He was very, very, kind of a stern, tough instructor, but was helpful to me in many ways at that age, at 18, 19, so.
Does any particular lesson from him stand out in your mind?
Well, he was my first medium, aside from drawing, was watercolor. So he was,
okay.
Yeah, my introductory to watercolors, which is interesting. Now I have a watercolor set in the corner of the studio that I'm terrified of when I look at it. Someday I'll break it out. But yeah, so that was, just his lessons in watercolor and drawing skills. So honestly, that level, the whole faculty there was great, and I still would throw a shout out to them for how helpful they were to me. And I'll try to quickly explain what your initial question was about the schism of modern art and representational traditional art. The first couple of years there is a lot of basics, fundamentals. You don't plan. We did not plein air paint. That was the one thing missing. That was not part of the program. It was all big studios that that were meant for that kind of studio work. So there's figure drawing and still lifes, and and then as you get to like junior year, you start to sort of phase into contemporary things. I was doing printmaking with painting over the printmaking and monotypes and things like that, and that really directed my senior thesis and what I did for the years after college, which was this sort of abstract expressionist mode, which I loved. It was fun. I got a couple local awards at some abstract shows in Rhode Island, which was really nice at that age, but really nothing of a career of art developing from that. So I wouldn't say I was jaded. I just sort of said, well, I don't know. And I was doing family, my father has a business I was helping him with. I did other things. I worked in other industries and the automotive remarketing industry. I was in that for a while. I was doing all these things to earn a living and go on with life, but trying to paint in the background. And then I was introduced to a local auction in Newport, I think the Newport Art Museum. And someone said, hey, why don't you give this a shot? They lent me a French easel. I went out and I'm like, oh, I get it now. Doing landscape painting is kind of cool if you're outside doing it. You can go meet up with your friends afterward and have breakfast and call. I'd say, okay, I get it. It's a social thing. And
it's
now,
a lifestyle.
Yeah. So I said, okay, now I get it. And that reverted me back to traditional painting style, or, trying to get down the landscape and the seascape, which I was not really, wasn't coming that direction out of college. Now, in retrospect, when I paint now, I know that what I learned at that time, I don't look at it as, oh, I was wasting my time with this type of stuff, like with the abstract modern stuff. There was still elements of how to put down paint, how to think as an artist. Composition was still part of the game plan, which is usually paramount for me at the beginning of a painting. All of that was still in play. And I totally appreciate what I learned at that time. And it's still in the paintings I do now. I look at it as it's all a nice big soup that I've had as an experience. I don't look at it as, oh, I missed an opportunity there. It was great. And I have an appreciation for, I loved abstract expressionism. I was an art history minor in American art. And so that was sort of, the mid-century stuff that was going on. And I like all that kind of work. I don't mind it. So but I kind of like it all to some degree. I definitely lean towards traditional art now, and particularly that's what I do. But I guess that's where I stand on it. I don't get quite as upset at modern art as some people might. But I get where people land in their different thought process. I don't think either one is ruining the progress of art. I guess if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's experimentation. The encouragement of experimentation benefits us all. So, and I enjoy it all. I don't like things that are debased or anything like that. I deal with enough negativity in my life. So I get that. That gets a little, yeah, it does. But on the other hand, without some of that stuff, maybe, and I don't have the answer to this. We don't have the benchmark for the opposite end of the spectrum of a fantastic landscape painting. We humans are very opinionated about different things, and that's what makes life very interesting. Is all the different opinions and approaches to things. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to see what people produce.
I'll probably never make another print again, like an etching or anything like that ever again.
But you could if you wanted to.
I'm glad. Well, I think I'd have to read but I'm glad I did. And the instructors I had in college, their own work is definitely more contemporary. But I learned so much about color. Like that was a big thing too. And mark making, surface texture, all those things are still sitting inside the landscape and traditional seascape paintings that I do now. So that's okay.
Well, what brings you the greatest joy when you're creating a painting?
I love the process. To me, I don't like having them. I love doing them. So it really is just the act of doing it is a lot of fun. And like you had mentioned, when I can pull off that atmosphere and light, that's really that impression of atmosphere and light. That's really gets me charged up. And that's why you see a lot of that in my work. And I don't always hit it. I don't always get it right. Sometimes people see those paintings, sometimes they don't. So yeah, I think that's really what I like most about it is, learning, trying some new things, pushing myself to get better at it. That's really what I like the most about sitting at the easel. And I also like I said before, the preparation is challenging to me, to make sure that I pick up the brush and know what I'm doing. I really want to know that I've got a good path to begin on. And it usually results in a more successful painting. Because it's hard. Like plein air painting that's a tough one when you got to go around, and sometimes just you have a chance to scope out what you're going to do ahead of time, and sometimes you don't. Sometimes it hits you, and then that's one of the biggest challenges of it is, what am I going to pick? What am I going to do? What am I going to edit out? And that's a challenging part of it. It's part of I guess that's why they call them competitions, because you're kind of trying to elevate to a different level. You don't have the comfort of the studio in the preparation that I was talking about.
Plein air painting seems to present two different scenarios. One is the idea of just doing a study, but when you have the events, you're creating a finished product that's going to be sold.
That's a challenging thing, because I try to paint in the studio in plein air the exact same way. I try to be as loose inside as I am in plein air. Now that doesn't always work out that way, but I've tried to not be so separate in my approaches, and that wasn't always the same for me. It was always just a fast sketch outside. Studio painting, I'd get small brushes and bear down, So I actually try to make my paintings look where you can't tell the difference. I don't know. I hope to make it look so you wouldn't really know, and that's a strange thing for the events out there. I think because if it's a study only, yet it's to get propped up as a finished piece of art of high quality and a certain level of value. It's interesting. It's a tough needle to thread, I think, that everybody sort of goes through. So I try to make it so that my painting outdoors and indoors is, to me, the truest version of the same process, if that makes any sense. It's probably going to be about the same amount of time, whether it's a 9x12 or an 18x24, the 18x24 inside and the 18x24 outside. There's not going to be a big disparity in my time in front of that painting.
Do you paint the same size paintings inside and outside, or do you go larger inside and smaller outside?
For the art events, sometimes there's a request to have some larger paintings because they may not want to have, 150 8x10s on the wall and 9x12s.
Larger in like 16x20 or?
So 18x24 is about the max I'll do outside, although I have done 24, 36, and I think that's about the maximum I've done outdoors. So, but that's rare. That's a rarity. So, up to 18x24, I can kind of operate the same inside or out. Above that, it gets a little different. When I go to the events, I'm trying to make the painting like I would as if I was inside, and trying to make it come across the process, the brush strokes, the color selection, the color palette. It's all trying to make my my process the same and translate into an equally important painting. It's kind of odd because it's different. It's a difficult thing to get to, and I wasn't always there where I could say I could step outside and kind of blend my processes, because they were vastly different at one time, indoors and out.
Well, as I look through your gallery, I would be hard pressed to say, oh yeah, that was done outside, this one was done inside, unless it's an obvious, still life or something like that. But I would be hard pressed to tell the difference. I mean, your voice, your style comes through very nicely in all these paintings.
That's a nice comment, because I've tried to get there. It really, to draw a straight line to it, I just tried to loosen up inside more than I once was, and I tried to be a little more exacting outside than I once was. I don't no, I'm not.
I guess that's a good convergence. That's nice.
Yeah, and that's where it kind of comes to where maybe you can't tell the difference, and that's what I was trying to do: get my paintings looser at the studio, and get them a little bit more, for lack of a better word, tighter outside, so that they had more of a finished quality outdoors in one session, or two if you got to return to the location, which I rarely do. I don't do that very often.
Well, you have so much to choose from in the New England coast. There's just so much to paint there. It's such a beautiful place.
It is. And Rhode Island's fantastic. We have a variety. We actually have some cliffs here that are likened. People have mistaken the cliffs around here from Maine when they see them in paintings, because there's some pretty big elevation. But then you can go just a few miles away and have a nice sandy beach, and then there's the working waterfronts and harbors and all the stuff I love. I love painting junky old boat basins and things like that. I really like that. It's starting to disappear a little bit as fiberglass is taking over more and more. So the traditional, all the scenes you'd see from the masters who came out of Cape Ann and Rockport and Gloucester, the types of boats that we love to paint are starting to not be around as much. Our subject matter is starting to deplete, but we need new subject matter, so that's okay. There'll be new things to do. So yeah, I'm learning how to paint center console fishing boats and things like that. So.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, at the beginning of our conversation, you'd mentioned your gallery representation, and how has that been affected by the situation that we're in right now? How are they adapting?
Well, I think it remains to be seen. I have a solo exhibition at Addison Art Gallery on Cape Cod, which is my kind of sole representation of Cape Cod paintings for sure. And just a real fantastic gallery. And they've already been ahead of the game on email distributions weekly and rotating the work, getting things out there to collectors who may not be in the area at the time, because it is sort of a seasonal place for some who have a home there, a second home there, or just visit on vacation. So that's a year-round thing that is already in place, and there's more to come, because I'll probably be doing some virtual stuff and some video of work for that. So that's, they're underway. Some of the other galleries that represent me, I know up in Maine, that gallery will be going pretty soon, and they have a great email. That's Camden Falls Gallery in Maine. They do a great distribution list as well. Their season's a little bit different up there because winter becomes a little bit more, bears down on you a bit more
yeah.
in Cape Cod and southern New England. So that's great. And locally in Rhode Island, there's a Fuller Gallery in Jamestown, Rhode Island, and Spring Bowl Gallery in Newport. They both have their own email distribution. And I think everyone's trying to figure out to what's the next level that's going to be needed. What are they going to do? Again, the seasonality affects things a little bit, because if in an area like New England, when things were down already in March, or they always are a little bit slower in March and April, right?
Right.
So
yeah.
You're not geared up anyway. And then this happens, the concern becomes, what's it going to look like in 2 or 3 months, So everyone that I, work with, and then I also do stuff with the Maritime Gallery in Mystic, Connecticut. They too are in a bit of a pause, I think, trying to figure out what the next steps are for getting information out there. My outlook on it is I'll try to do everything I can. The galleries that represent my work, who've always done a really great job of that, or I've had different other galleries that have come and gone, some great, some not so great. But where I'm at now, I'm happy with everyone that I'm working with, and they, will have their own degree of adjusting to this, and I'll do everything I can to help as far as content, both painting and media wise. If I can do demonstrations and videos and things like that, I'll do whatever I can. And I think it remains to be seen how much of that is going to be needed. But everybody's got their eye on it and are really trying to figure out the next steps. But we are, like I said, seasonality wise, particularly here in Rhode Island, not so much out on the Cape or maybe even in Maine, but things slow down a little bit in the winter and even early spring. But they'll be coming back, and we'll have to see the interest in art.
So their customers are primarily tourists or people who are vacationing in the area?
I think it's mostly residents, be it part-time residents or or more permanent residents. Although I will say there's some tourism mixed into that too. There's a little bit of that too, of the passing through, and when that's the case, it's usually somebody who has had a connection to the area, lived here in their childhood, they've had that past longer experience. You know what I mean?
Right.
Rather than someone who's been here for the first time and wants a memento of the area. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think that's as often as somebody may not live here. They may come back to visit family or whatnot, but they have a connection that happened at some point in their life.
And that connection usually takes time to develop, as opposed to just driving through.
Yeah. And it's hard. Galleries they do a lot of work to keep that mailing list going, keep the collectors interested, and I appreciate everything that they do, because I paint. I don't have time to promote as much as, I don't want to say as much as I wish I could. I don't know. I don't know what it looks like on the other side that much, but I totally understand where artists are self-promoting and have taken that path. Hasn't been my path, but I've had some great some nice experiences with the galleries that represent my work at this time. So that's pretty cool.
So what does a good experience with a gallery look like?
I think one good thing is sort of a two-way street of expectation.
You're entering into a partnership. Yeah,
and each one's a little different. Sometimes if you're into a gallery that is maybe not in your state, or it's a regional gallery that's taken on work of yours, sometimes the expectation of the inventory that they can represent needs to be realistic. Not every gallery is going to be able to have 15 or 20 of your paintings hanging all the time. Whereas a local gallery that's dear to you, or when I say that, I mean, like, you might know the owner well and be friendly with, and they'll, just miles away, you might have a situation where you can show that much work, and where you can rotate work freely and without much notice and things like that. So every situation is so different to say what's a good relationship. But usually, if both parties understand what their expectations are, as far as attending shows and cross promoting, I think it's important to promote both ways, to promote if you're going to be in galleries, it's good to mention them. I think that's just my, okay, if they've got the painting, they've got the painting. So I better help them sell it. I didn't see as much of that in the early days of the internet and social media, but now I think it's really a necessity that it's a partnership of getting a goal accomplished, the same goal accomplished. So, but as examples, I don't know, they're just, it takes some time because you go through some bumps in the road. I had some galleries in my when I say early years, I'd say, 15, 20 years ago that, I'm like, oh, that didn't work out so great. They didn't take many paintings and they got kind of put to the back. And in retrospect, I understand why. Maybe they weren't that great. That's part of the growing pains of all this. I'm very fortunate to have landed in a pretty good spot with the galleries I found in New England that have my work right now. Yeah, very lucky. I've worked at it and went through some growing pains with all that, but it's pretty good. And there was a gallery in Newport, Rhode Island, she was a friend of mine, friend of my fellow artists who are around here, and was just wonderful. But decided it was time to move on and change her life. And I was really saddened to see that gallery go, on a number of levels. But that happens too. Sometimes galleries close because it's time for them to not do it anymore.
Yeah, I mean, things change, people change, and a lot of galleries are owned by an individual that's very passionate about art, and in time they have to move on for whatever reasons. And the same is true with the artist. Think about this. There comes a time when an artist may not be able to produce anymore or wants to move on and do something different.
Yeah, that's true too. And the galleries, as they move on, I guess the one concern is, from the artist standpoint, is who's going to pick up the torches, as being proprietors of art galleries. Sometimes it's artists. You see a lot of that now, where there's artists who run an art gallery. So they have their own work, and then they have they'll have, and this isn't new, this has been going on for a long time, but I think it might be more prevalent now because the interest in owning an art gallery may be kind of focusing down in on the artists themselves who show their own work and take on a dozen other artists who are their friends or whatnot. That might be a model that grows more for brick and mortar galleries. I could be wrong.
What few examples that I've seen that where people have created their own galleries, and there's a level of prestige associated with it. There's a level of satisfaction of having your own place that you can control. Yeah, I've seen some people do that, and they seem to enjoy it. How much money they're making at it, I don't know.
Well, if they're showing only their own work, that they get 100% of that. So
right.
That's a start, But yeah, I say, well, that'd be a great thing to do someday, but I don't know if I'd ever do it. I don't know if I'd be good at selling art for other people. I don't know if I could ever, I could probably do okay with my own work because I don't mind talking, but I don't know how much I could. I don't know if I get the energy to do it across the board for multiple people. And that's why gallery owners are great at what they do. They're good at having a good understanding of everybody in their stable. I would say, and one other aspect is my website is set up such that the galleries that represent my work, and sometimes I even pop in there, like if I'm got a show at the American Impressionist Society, which I love participating in, or the Salmagundi Club in New York, I'll pop in a page for them for a period of time. And the galleries that represent my work all have a page on my website that directs towards them with the images that they have, like the images of the paintings that they have in their inventory. So in the direction, for inquiry or, purchase, if it gets that far, it goes off into their direction. But my page, I really try to keep that updated and accurate. And that takes a lot of time to make sure that, okay, that painting came back or that sold, I got to take it down, make sure it's not kind of misleading where it is. But that's a decision that I made several years ago where I would put up the work that's the work that's at galleries gets its own page.
I think that's great.
I have a page on there too that's in the studio.
Yeah, but that's an interesting idea because what I normally see is there will be a tab on a website that says galleries, and then there's one page that lists all the galleries they are in, but you are dedicating an entire landing page to a gallery or show or an event.
I still believe it's important for me to have the paintings on my site because I have a good image of it, or at least I hope a decent image of it.
Yeah, the first place people are going to go when they, hear about you on this podcast is that they're going to go to jonathanmcphillips.com and see your art.
Yeah, and I also have that proper direction that this particular painting is at this place. You can ask me about it, but they're the ones who know about it more than me.
So there's no conflict of interest there. Yeah.
I mean, I pretty much, my personal path has been that if it's the gallery up in Camden, Maine, if it's a painting of Maine, that's the best place for it typically. Right.
Yeah.
And the gallery on Cape Cod and Orleans, if it's a painting of the National Seashore, clearly of Norset Beach or something, that's where that painting belongs. I don't have that's how it's designated, and whereas my own paintings might be more like I don't have like Rockport, Mass. I might have a bunch of those type of paintings in my own studio page.
Do you get to have any interaction with the customers at all when a sale is made?
Yeah, when there's gallery openings and whatnot, I've been very fortunate enough to meet some of the patrons who are really supportive, and that's not all. Of course, not all. There's a lot that I'm just not there. And there is some interaction. Of course, that interaction happens at the plein air events a bit more than you might find in your gallery situation.
Yeah.
Right. So overall, no, I think there's been more sold than I've met. That's for sure. But that's hard to avoid, I think. But I am grateful for the people I have met, and that that's from shows and openings at the various galleries, because they do a great job of getting the artists and the collectors connected. And I think that's what galleries are making an effort for right now, is to keep that connection going. Let the get the artists, be it on video or whatever likely video, to sort of talk to the collectors that way. So it's a good, it's a good effort. It's a good thing to try to do.
Well, I appreciate that insight into it. I've not had gallery representation. I'm not at that point yet, but it's interesting to hear that perspective.
Yeah, I was not at that point at one time too. I had, I did have. I studied. I was a fine art major in college, like we talked about before. So I had to do something. I had to do something with it, right? So,
well, that's what my wife says about all these paintings in my house. You got to do something with these.
Well, yeah, but you didn't. The college education comes with a little bit of a price tag that needs some.
Oh yeah.
Comes due at some point. So that was part of it, and I was starting out earlier. I started on the early side. Actually, the first thing that I did was, I got, at this time that I was graduating college there, the casino industry was starting up in Connecticut, in a little bingo hall at a Native American tribe there that ran a bingo hall. They were getting funding, and then the laws were passing. They were expanding it's now a big casino, with hotels and everything. And they were just starting up, and there was a connection to this college. Somebody knew somebody, and I was actually working with, like, gambling imagery was part of my abstract expressionism back then. It was like cards, dice. I was, kind of dismantling those images and repurposing them into my own.
So it fit, yeah.
My own crazy college stuff, So they approached me because they were kind of throwing money around to decorate, and they said, well, we'll do 2 paintings, and this is, the price back then. If I had used those prices to set my scale at that point, I wouldn't have sold anything after that. I had to come back down to earth, because they sort of had a good budget and an altruism for the community at the time to try to get everybody.
But that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, so I spent that summer doing 2 paintings for them. Like they were acrylic on paper, and I had to do the frame. I brought them to them, and I got this big check for 21-year-old kid. And it was all downhill after that. That was when I was still doing some, somewhat abstraction. You can call it even surrealism, was mixed in there. And then that was another pretty cool experience that had happened. I still have a copy of the check somewhere too. I maintain that stuff for posterity.
Well, one of the biggest mistakes I ever made, this was back in my early days of where I was just painting. I would dabble. I would do a painting, and then a year would go by, and then I'd do another. But I had this one painting that was hanging in a Borders bookstore, and I have it hanging in my office today. And they called me and said, "Hey, there's this guy that really likes your painting. Would you meet him?" And I said, "Sure." I went up there and met him, had a cup of coffee with him, and he says, "I'll give you, $2,000 for that painting." And I said, "No." And I don't know what on earth I was thinking. Why did I tell this man no? I wished I had sold it. It's still in my office to this day.
Hey, I get it. I have plenty of artist friends who are, they grow attached to their favorite paintings. I used to do that too. I'm like, I can't get rid of this,
Yeah.
I think my wife has a few of those of mine that I supposedly can't sell. They're older now though. And I'm like, well, I got to. If I need the frame, I need the we got
to make the sacrifice, right?
Yeah. So I don't, I don't know. I do find I'm glad I could help my household through doing it, to whatever degree that is. And everybody has different needs. And I'm fortunate enough, when I step back and look at it, I'm very fortunate enough to be able to make something at what I love to do. And I'm okay with that. And as long as I'm painting images that I really, really feel compelled to do, I'm happy. And I'm pretty flexible with that. Like I'm up for, I don't mind the challenge of doing something different. That was part of what, with going to the Olmsted for us was, especially before we move around the state a little bit. Everyone was like, I was like, where's the water? Can somebody said, well, go down into the Olmsted Linear Park and there's a creek. And I'm ready to go down there. So you've been there?
Yeah,
yeah. Where is it? Like, well, it's right there. Like, that's a, they're like, well, if it rains in a couple days, it'll be really flowing pretty good. So that was great. I did a painting of that creek, Deep Dean. That's what it's called. And I did a painting of that, and it was very well received that was the first year of Olmsted. So had I done a lot of creek paintings before that in the woods? No, not really. I have one right near my home. I don't go to it often. I go to the coast. I get in the car and I'll drive the 2 miles or 10 miles to find a coastal spot, a place to paint. So, the things all around me now, I'm walking around much more now, just locally in the neighborhood. It's kind of a countryish type road. It's not a neighborhood as such, but there's houses, but spread out. And I walk around and I'm like, well, this is a beautiful spot. Never thought of painting here. And it's 1,000 feet away. So, and when I went to Atlanta, we were also in at Buckhead and in the city. And I'm like, wow, okay, this is some challenging stuff to draw from. But boy, it's amazing what all the artists come up with. And I'm very humbled when I see what some of the creative places that the other painters come up with.
I agree. I'm just totally amazed each time they have this event and I see the paintings. It just blows me away. It inspires me as an artist too to really expand my vision, to consider, maybe there's a painting there, something you might initially dismiss. There's actually a painting there that can come to life. So that's one of the lessons I take away when I see the beautiful diversity of paintings that the artists who are invited not only to Olmsted but any event. I'm just amazed at how you can never have enough artists. Each one has their own way of saying something, and I just find that fascinating.
Yeah, and I think that it helps. Maybe the people who live in the area who go to view the event, they hopefully they have an opportunity to maybe see their location in a different light that they maybe took for granted. Exactly. Like, oh wow, that rail yard actually is kind of pretty, that kind of thing, or that that cluster of buildings. God, I never realized how lovely that can look if handled a certain way. So that's pretty cool. And that, like you said, that can happen all over the place at the different events, And some people will have liked in my work. Some other artists have said that I always have a good story going on, which is interesting in the landscape painting. And I kind of get to see that now, where even my own enjoyment of art, and I am by no means a great scholar of art. I'll be right up front admitting that. I wish I had more time to dive into it. And I have some artist friends who are fantastic at that, and they know everything. And I was listening to the George Van Hook.
Oh, yeah.
I want to sit down with him. He can give me everything I need to know in an hour. This is great. This is so informative and wonderful, and piecing together vast spans of history and art into a tight box. So that was great. But I've always been drawn to things that I guess is where man's intervention into the scene is kind of evident. The scene of an empty beach, to me, has never been as compelling as the beach that has an umbrella on it, or the people in the distance, or something like that. And I'm not I probably have passable mediocrity in painting the figure or whatnot. So whenever in my paintings, they're usually sitting in the midground or background as elements. They're not focal point. But I always enjoy the boat, the harbor, the some sort of man's intervention into the landscape. And to me, that elevates the narrative. And it actually opens up the narrative of a painting to have all kinds of interpretations from the viewer. Whereas, and I totally get it. I love just a organic landscape where, particularly the mountains, when you see the paintings of Jackson Hole and out west, the western landscape, they're almost meant to not be pictured with a fly. They look great when someone puts a fly fisherman in there sometimes, but they look equally as good without.
Right. They stand on their own. Yeah.
Yeah, I find that like the landscape that I live in, it's almost like I'm avoiding the truth if I'm not including our presence. I try to work those stories in. Doesn't have to be like hit you over the head with like, this is what's happening. This guy is shellfishing or this person is lifting things out of a boat. I don't want it to be that overt, but I do want to have a little bit of an open-ended narrative for the viewer.
I like mystery.
Yeah, to kind of make up their own story, like, oh, I was there. I remember something like that. Or I know that. Sometimes it's really like, oh, I know that boat or I know that bridge. I know that element. And that's a connection with the viewer too. That's really kind of cool. And I'll never really not always be privy to what that connection is. I'm just hoping to make something that they can grab onto. And sometimes that presence of a man-made element helps. Be it built, sometimes it's just a shed or whatever that may be. Because I remember I was painting in the woods locally here a couple years ago, and I kind of stole an element from a different part. There was a running creek, the water was rolling over the rocks and whatnot. And I took an element that was in another part of the creek that wasn't in front of me, which was like just two boards that went across it, which was intended to be the way, somebody just put them there as a way to just easily step across. But they weren't in front of the spot that I wanted. They were in a different spot. And I'm like, well, I need those things.
I'm taking them.
I am taking them. I need to put those over here to make my story a little bit more compelling. And those are the type of things you try to decide as an artist, and you do it through your photographs or on site. It's challenging, that's for sure.
Yeah, it is. It certainly is challenging. I'm in that process of learning how to do that.
Like I said before, that practice part is important. Take a little time, just maybe do an extra thumbnail sketch before starting a plein air painting, or even if it's a studio painting, just a little bit more time of what am I doing here? What's my point? What's the focus of this going to be? Sometimes it's hard because we get into workshops and we have images. Well, I want to paint this thing that I loved going to when I was on vacation. In a photograph, in our eyesight when we're on there, it looks beautiful. But sometimes nature presents us with things that just don't translate onto canvas. You can have a photograph of an oak tree in the middle of a field that in the photograph is gorgeous and beautiful. And when you were in front of it, you remembered how beautiful it was. But if you put that big green cotton ball into the middle of a painting, it's likely going to have a challenge of easily getting you to conveying a good point. Sometimes you're handicapping yourself going in with choosing subject matter. So that's a tough thing to do. It's all about what's going to translate well into a painting. Some shapes in nature are wonderful, and we need to study them hard and really bring them into our paintings. And then there's other times when there's other shapes in nature, or be it man-made shapes of objects, that they can really hinder a painting if you try to translate them literally or not alter them in some way. And that's the trick of an artist, is to try to figure out how do you take what you're seeing, all the visual information, and work it in your favor. That takes time. It takes a bit of time, but every time you get somewhere, you got to be able to feel it. I have groups of friends who will share images at times. What do you think of this? And usually there's a compositional thing. A couple of the artists that I, friends, whatnot, we're looking at the composition for us, because I think if you got to get the composition right. I think you've heard this often, And then to me, the other stuff can start to fall in place. Now, a colorist would look at things differently. They would care less about, maybe they don't care about the composition. But in trying to depict the scene in a convincing way, I'll start there with trying to get the design correct or as good as possible without too many, being both comfortable yet a little bit energized, which is a hard rope to walk right there. So that's what you're trying to do. It's very easy to beat ourselves up about our paintings. I see it in workshops. Oh God, this is awful. I'll never be as good as the instructor. I can't do this right. So you see this a lot. And artists, we do it to ourselves. A few years ago, I started to give myself probably too much credit off the easel. So everything I just did, I was taking a photograph of it right away, maybe posting it online right away. I was trying to treat that thing like it's the best thing I've ever done. Now, maybe I was right. likely I was wrong. I wanted to give it some room to breathe. I wanted to give a paint. Maybe in a couple of days, I realized the errors. Sometimes you look at sometimes you look at a photo of your painting on your phone and in a small version, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a UFO in the middle of my painting. I didn't know I painted that, because you can't see it. You can't see that when it's in front of you in real life. It might take a couple days to see that, or a couple weeks even, as a studio painting is sitting there. So, but I also didn't want to keep beating them up for all their problems immediately, my own painting. So I said, I'm going to treat everyone like it's got a good shot, and let's sit around and see what things look like in a few days. And sometimes they would stand that test of short time or a long time. And okay, yeah, it was right. Doesn't really need any adjustments. And then I'd come back to reality and be like, okay, I need to do, these kinds of changes, or maybe it's just unsavable. I was starting out in a different place of positivity, whereas instead of being like, what's wrong with my painting? We can kind of get into that thing. What's wrong with this? Which is good.
But isn't there another question? Like, what's right with this painting? Isn't that just as valid?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And that's one of the things I try to convey in my workshops. And sometimes my students will say, oh, this guy's just trying to shoot rainbows at me and unicorns and stuff. But I would say, like, listen, these things need to be worked on. Like, this thing could use some effort or whatnot. But I'm happy to point out like a corner of a painting or a brushstroke or something in there where I'll say, you see this? You may have done it without thinking, but please remember it. Like remember the things that are working. And if someone can help tell you, like, hey, this part is getting along well. Like, you didn't do this last week or last year. That is as beneficial in my mind as pointing out the flaws, especially when people are trying to just enjoy painting. They may not be trying to get into, the Met, but they're trying to just enjoy painting. I think that's really important, because you can say, listen, you see this thing that you did? And they say, yeah, I can see it. I said, well, that's in my opinion, that's dead on. Like, you really nailed that. And you may have stumbled upon it by accident, but remember it. Remember that's a good part. Now let's talk about some of these other things that could be different and you should probably avoid doing next time. I just find that approach is much better. We have enough things in our life that are inherently difficult and require stern evaluation throughout our lives. I'm not sure painting should be one of those for people who are trying to enjoy doing it. I totally understand that painting is a high art that needs to be at a fine art high level, but we are collectively spreading the news. We're collectively, as through painting events, through galleries, through now it's a lot of online and video production. We're all spreading this thing that needs to be able to help people in positive ways at all levels. Doesn't just have to be the masterful, which has its place too.
Sure.
The modern masters are definitely, they've got their place and are being recognized and will be so going forward. In years to come, which is good too. There's enough to spread. It's enough to spread around. I think that's what you find in workshop is want to make people enjoy it, get better at whatever their goals might be. You try to figure out what people are there for, you start to figure out, okay, this particular person really wants to be in a show in the local art association. Okay. So there's that level of instruction you gotta think about. And then there's some people who are there, I'm here with my friend, to have a nice weekend. I didn't feel like golfing this weekend. That's another level that you've got to adjust to. And it's all good, in my opinion. So,
well, Jonathan, I'd like to take a workshop from you now. You'd be my kind of instructor. Of course, all the instructors I've had have been kind to me. So I think your point is well made. We don't need to be beat up. But I will say, as a student, we need to be humble enough to recognize that we need to be able to evaluate ourselves to a degree and be willing to accept some correction as we go along, because we can't grow without it.
Yeah, I mean, I remember I think I had a student once who was really trying to draw something like it's just exactly, and that would have taken that takes, if they want to go dedicate maybe a couple years or at the continuing education in pencil drawing and that kind of thing. Okay, that's going to get you there. But for the purpose of my workshop, I was noticing these fantastic, thick, juicy, like they had more paint out on the palette than me, which is hard to do.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes often you see a lot of little dabs of paint to conserve, and I'm not quite too good at that. I sort of like that. I don't want to run out of paint when I'm in a session. So even though I do often, but this person was in the opposite end of the spectrum. They were just putting up big chunks of paint, and I was like, whoa, that's really pretty how that's going on. And I tried to say, the drawing stuff is something you might have to do in a different thing. Like I can teach you, sit here and teach you how to draw, but we might be wasting our 3 days, in my the little bit of individual one-on-one time you have in a workshop situation. So I said, push these big juicy brush strokes that you have going on here. I go, I have trouble doing those, when I want to, or when I think they'll be necessary in like a patch of grass or a patch of marshland.
So he was doing a good job with the brush strokes, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Oh yeah. This was actually a woman, and I said, do that. And after a couple of days, they were having a great time. That doesn't always happen this way, but I said, well, that was kind of a success because they started on a path. They actually had a little bit of abstraction in what they were doing, and their enjoyment latched onto that. The process and the enjoyment kind of melded together a little bit. And it wasn't because I felt compelled to try to show them how to perfectly draw a marsh line, for instance, or a blade of grass, and hopefully guided them into a direction that suits their style that they didn't know they had.
Well, I'm sure that's wonderful. Well, Jonathan, I look forward to seeing some of your submissions to the Olmsted Plein Air Invitational 2020, even though it will be virtual. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Oh, yeah, me too. I look forward to seeing all the other work, too, from the other artists who...
it's a great lineup of artists, that's for sure. Yeah.
Humbling roster, that's for sure. Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being a part of the Artful Painter today.
Thank you for having me. It's been really fun. It's nice to chat. Haven't had any opportunities to talk about art in the last few weeks, so that's good.
Oh, I love talking.
Yeah, me too. Okay, I always get accused of that. So, well, it's been great, Carl. I appreciate the time.
We'll see you soon. I truly enjoy talking with the artists who appear on The Artful Painter. I learned so much from each of them, and that's been true with Jonathan McPhillips. He was a real delight to talk with, and I learned so much from him. Please be sure to check out Jonathan's website, jonathanmcphillips.com. As usual, I will provide a link in the blog post associated with this episode. Jonathan is also one of the artists invited to participate in the 2020 Olmsted Plein Air Invitational, and I'm pleased to be one of the Olmsted partners in this year's Reimagined Olmsted event. The virtual gallery is open from April 18th through July 31, so please visit them at olmstedpleinair.com. Again, the link is in the show notes. There are so many pieces of beautiful art in Olmsted's virtual gallery this year, including that of this episode's guest, Jonathan McPhillips. Please visit the virtual gallery. You will not regret it. You will see the artwork of all the artists that have been invited to participate in Olmsted Plein Air. Also, you have the opportunity to purchase art in that gallery, and that's a great way to support the participating artists, is to purchase their art. Lillian Ansley, who is one of the co-founders of Olmsted Plein Air, has put together a beautiful online collector's preview catalog. You can find a link to that virtual gallery on Olmsted's Plein Air site, as well as in the show notes and blog posts for this episode found at carlolson.tv. Well, there's a lot more coming up in The Artful Painter. I can't wait to share the episodes I've already recorded for you. Prepare to be inspired and informed. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this edition of The Artful Painter. I'll see you in the next episode.
Picture on the TV.